Hello, my name is Layla and welcome to my weekly analysis for the week commencing the 9th of July 2017. This week I'm going to be looking at dollar yen, and as usual I like to start with the monthly chart for a bit of what I would call the higher time frame context. Now we do obviously look at the price action, but while the price action is building for the current bar, it's not relevant from that particular point of view, but we can still use the prior months in terms of a reminder of what the picture was back then, and we can also use it as a way of discerning where prices come from and where it might be likely to go to. It's also a good place to look for your higher time frame key levels as well. So in this particular instance I want to just walk you through why I have a few lines on my charts that look a bit like trend lines and channel lines that don't quite fit, and the reason why they might look like they don't quite fit is because I'm using them in a particular way, which isn't just about, oh, I've got 3 touches and therefore I can draw a line. It's actually about where price has reacted on either side of a line, where in effect I'm bisecting areas of price where there's a lot of activity, and that's really what I'm looking for. I guess you could say I'm looking for lots and lots of touches, and obviously I'm looking for something which is fairly clean, because otherwise I could effectively put the line anywhere I like. So in this particular instance I just want to point out that I have a good clean touch here, and then I have a little area of consolidation, but it is still pretty clean, and then from here I have a price action which has tested it on a couple of occasions in a very normal sort of trend-like manner. It's come into it in a very clean way and has moved away. So effectively I have a line here that I'm happy to use. I'm happy with this angle, I'm happy with this position. The other way in which I can use it, other than the way I've described, which is basically bisecting price action, is that now that I have an angle, I can use this angle again. Now by that I mean that I can actually pick this line up and I can move it to another position where I also again get an awful lot of sort of price reaction, if you like, and this is the other point that I would this is the other area that I would find interesting in the future. Now we're clearly a long way from this at the moment, but if we do get near it, then I have a line that could potentially provide a good area for resistance once price starts to get near it. So I like to know where some of this might be coming. Now the reason why I've chosen this particular position is because we have quite a few touches through here. We've got a touch here, we have a doji which is effectively reacting to price from above and below, and we also have price having pulled into this particular level. Obviously this is a conjunction of things which would also have been to do with horizontals, but the fact is the trend line runs through the top and price pushed away. So for me this is also another way in which I can use these lines. They're not just static trend lines that stay in one place, and they can also be used obviously once a trend gets going for an area where price might want to pull back into. So effectively if we did move into an area where there was a well-defended level, we could find that this would be a good place to consider where price might want to pull back into. But that's not actually what I'm talking about on this particular occasion, but I did want to describe why it is that I've got a few slightly strange looking lines on my chart. So just looking more closely at this particular currency pair, let me just get this back in position. Looking a bit more closely at where we are, I just want to talk you through what's actually occurred in recent time. So the 200 EMA, which is this yellow one here, has had a fair amount of activity, both as a cause for resistance and as a cause for support. We've been quite recently, I say recently, a few months ago, but in terms of bars it's quite recent, we've had a consolidation below price, and effectively it punched its way through straight through the 50, the 10 and the 200 with this huge bar that was back in November. I think that was actually it was an October bar, sorry, my apologies. That was back in October 2016. So we had a good punch through. So effectively this shows that there is a considerable amount of bullish potential in whatever comes after what I think is trying to happen now. So I'm going to then talk you through this particular part of it. So effectively we've had this consolidation, we've had a punch through all the EMAs, we've come into the top, we've come into below this range, and we've reversed. We've had what I would call a bit of a pullback, but this pullback didn't actually create effectively another leg like this, which would have been through here and would have given us a lower low, and effectively that would have been a lower high, in which case we have a completely different set of circumstances compared to what's been occurring here, which is an uptrend. What we've had is a fairly sort of mixed bag of price action bars on a pullback into a pretty solid area of support, which is again a combination of a price level, it's a combination of this high, it's also this 50 EMA on the monthly, and this trend line that I've just been describing. So here is a lot of activity where price has pulled into and then pushed away. Now we did have a push through, and then we had a second attempt to just be sure that this particular support level was going to hold, and from that point on we've been trying to push higher. So everything about what's occurred in the history of this particular time frame shows me that price is trying to move higher. Now of course whether it manages to is a completely separate issue. However, dealing with technical analysis, we can only read what we've seen and what we think price is more probable, what is more probable it could do. So having a look at the next time frame, which is the weekly, you can see, or rather we can see, that we have a little bit more detail, but again we have a very, very strong major EMA right below price. So where we had the 50 on the monthly, we've now got the 200 on the weekly. So we've pushed into here and we've effectively attempted to put in a lower high. But we were going to be looking at more of a sell-off, but this was completely negated by 2 weeks of pressing into the 200, never quite actually touched it again, and then pushing away and rejected twice. So we've been, from this point onwards, we've been in buying mode. Now what is quite different about this particular selection of price action bars is that the momentum appears to be increasing, and we can see this because the bars are gradually getting bigger until we've reached our current circumstances, which was last week's bar. So you see here we had price action that actually started to slow down as it reached its effective top, which would have been a combination of a price level, a trend line, any other manner of conditions that you could think of. But we had a bit of a warning because we got quite a sort of long tail on the top of this bar. Even though it was a little bit bullish, it really didn't have anything like the power that the previous bar had, whereas here we've actually increased the momentum, plus we've now actually closed higher than this previous close here. So everything about this tells me again that this is trying to make its way higher. Now the other thing that I also want to point out, that I've also noticed, is that we've got the 50, the 20 and the 10 EMA all lining up very nicely in a very supportive fashion, as if they are carrying price, and this is on the weekly chart. So this definitely has some weight to it. We can certainly see that price has pulled in very nicely and has pushed away from it, and as I want to point out, this is not overextended, even though we've had quite a largish bar, not as big as obviously this one and some of the other bars that we've had in history, and that one and this one here. But it's a good sized bar, so we are not in an overextended condition either, which means there's still potential for price to continue moving higher. Given that the overall context of the monthly and the weekly, as I'm now describing, is trying to effectively get higher, then for me this is potentially where price is trying to aim for, which is the 115 level. So taking a look at the daily, and I'm just arming and ahhing as to whether I might be able to describe this on the weekly, but I think actually going to the daily might be a little bit easier. Let me just get back into the correct position and also make this a little bit smaller. Just wanting to get into a little bit of the detail that we can find on the daily, you can see that it's got quite an interesting characteristic, and it's got a sort of concerted push higher, then a bit of a pullback, concerted push higher, pullback, good strong bar, push, pull back, and we're in a similar situation whereby, judging by this sort of staircase trend effect that we've been making, which has been pulling in beautifully to the 10 EMA, and as you can see we've got the 200, the 50, the 20 and the 10 all lining up perfectly, all fanned out in exactly the right order, looking very, very neat as they run in a very supportive sort of manner underneath all of this price action. The way that this is looking at the moment, even though I can see it continuing in this bullish vein simply because of all the things that I've described, because of this characteristic, it may want to repeat this sort of push through pullback scenario. So we might need to be a bit prepared for the fact that we could have a little bit more buying, and then we might need a little bit of a pullback. How the price is going to do this over the week ahead is a little bit trickier to say. My initial reaction is that as it seems to have got going, and obviously the more people have seen this, the more they get on board with the same direction, and so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you like. It is possible that momentum may well continue to increase, in which case we might see that we continue to buy from here. However, I'm just saying be prepared that on some of the lower time frames, and I'm saying daily and 4 hour, not as in much lower, we might see, because you would see pullbacks on the much lower time frames, but I'm just saying be prepared for the daily and the 4 hour that there could be some pullbacks that could be occurring. However, this definitely has, from the monthly and the weekly point of view, a fair amount of bullish sentiment underlying the way the price action and the patterns have put themselves in their current order. And by that I mean the way that this is stepping up beautifully as an uptrend, and the way that on both the weekly and the monthly we've pushed into the 50 and the 200 EMA, and how we've moved away perfectly from them. And double bottoms tend to result in a reaction to the opposite, to a reaction in the opposite direction, which is far greater in its sort of momentum, if you like. So everything is playing out just as we would expect, judging by the technical analysis of this particular currency pair. So I'm just saying, because it seems to have got itself into a bit of a habit, just watch out for that. However, there is potential for this to just keep moving through. So I have my next level at 115. We are currently dealing with the round number of 114, so that's also an opportunity for price to perhaps consolidate and then gather up a bit more buying momentum and then push through. So that's really what I wanted to say. And also just bear in mind that on the RSI on the daily we're quite near what would be considered the overbought area. Do remember though that price can actually skim along the top of an overbought area for some considerable time when it's trending. That generally means that it's just a strong trend, and you could be continually expecting it to be, because it's in an overbought zone, you continue thinking it's going to be reversing, and it doesn't. It just carries on traveling sideways along the top of the 80 band. That's quite possible. So until I get a pattern occurring here and a divergence sort of pattern on the RSI, then we don't have anything. What I do have is RSI that completely agrees with what's going on at the moment. We've put in a higher high, and we've got a higher low, which is what we've got here. This is a higher high and this is a higher low. So there's nothing that I'm going to be saying about being overbought at this stage. I'd need to see something that started putting in lower highs, at least on the RSI, as this was moving higher. Then I might be thinking that perhaps the momentum is starting to wane. But in the meantime, this, on every time frame that we've looked at, has shown that it's got a bullish bias. So that's the only way that we can read it. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye bye.